Nichol Kessinger, one of the most popular names in true crime. We here at CrimeTalk seem to get questions about her every day. So we decided to put a little compilation of Scott's responses and thoughts on Miss Nichol. We hope you enjoy.
So, the next item on the docket that I'd like to talk about are probably the two most hated women in America right now. One does not have to look far on YouTube to find out that Nichol Kessinger is truly despised by many, many people, not only in this country, this state of Colorado, as well as around the world. And for those of you who do not know, the Chris Watts, who pled guilty to killing his wife, unborn child, and two small children, Miss Kessinger was the admitted girlfriend, mistress, whatever you'd like to call her, of Mr. Watts. And we brought it to you, I think, first. There were lots of videos out there, but we're the ones that brought you the actual email that showed Kessinger knowing that he was married, that they really liked each other, and that basically that this relationship was starting to flourish. There's also information out there about how many text messages that they sent back and forth, how many times they've communicated back and forth, the email searches of her being Miss Nichol Kessinger, basically planning their marriage. She admitted that she wanted the life of Shanann Watts. She wanted the home and the picture and things like that. And when you listen to her interviews, which we've put up on this page, and we can try to link those below, but they're definitely on the page, where her information doesn't necessarily jive with what was in the actual records, saying that she didn't know that Mr. Watts was married. She had no idea. And then the vagueness, the games that were kind of played as it relates to turning over her cell phone records. If you know somebody had just possibly committed at the time, she said she didn't know, but if thought that your boyfriend had killed his wife and two children, you would think that all that information would be relevant, unless, of course, there's something on there that you don't know. And so when these officers are going up and re-interviewing Mr. Watts, I'd be curious to see if they're trying to find if somebody else participated or did anything along those lines, requested him to do anything. So Miss Kessinger is obviously despised by many people. I've seen lots of things refer to her as a homewrecker, but let's be frank, takes two to tango, and Mr. Watts and his marriage may have already been over, but perhaps salvageable, but for Miss Kessinger being involved and participating. And she was one of the last people with Chris Watts the night of the murders, multiple murders, and she's just not, she put herself in a bad light. And apparently, I cannot confirm this because otherwise it would make no sense. If she's in witness protection, they weren't going to tell us where she's going to be. There's been reports that she's in Oregon, but who knows? We've tried to do some research around her, and we can't necessarily find her here. I think she just simply wanted to disappear and forget about it. There's been talk that she was going to write a book or have book deals, but nothing like that has come to fruition. And if she's smart, she probably wants to just go away and be forgotten. The next matter on the docket today has to do with a question that we put out on our community page regarding the Watts case. What question, as we approach nearly the 1-year anniversary of the deaths of Shanann Watts, Bella, and Celeste, and the unborn child? Overwhelmingly, the greatest question was, why has Nichol Kessinger not been charged? I am here to answer that question. We have all of the interviews that have been conducted by the police with Miss Kessinger. We've also talked about the interview that she did with the local Channel 7 news channel here. She denies knowing anything that took place related to Shanann and the kids. Bottom line, short of Nichol Kessinger admitting that she helped plan or knew what was going to take place and then helped try to cover it up for Christopher Watts, it is unlikely and impossible that she will be charged. Let's talk about what the prosecutor would have to prove, and you can decide whether they think there's enough evidence. So in all criminal cases, the person that is charged with actually doing the act is referred to as the principal. The principle of first-degree murder is that they would have to prove that the defendant, the person charged, not someone to look like them, not someone using their identity, but that particular defendant, knowingly took the life of another person without legal justification after deliberation. There's no evidence that Nichol Kessinger did any of that. Absolutely nothing. An alternative theory for prosecution for Nichol Kessinger would be that she was a complicitor. A complicitor is someone that aids, encourages, or embeds somebody in the commission of an offense. Frankly, there is not any evidence that I have seen, whether it be through interviews or other evidence, that would suggest that she did that. Now let's talk about the legal definition of complicity that a district attorney would have to prove and a jury would have to decide if this took place. So we're looking at the Colorado criminal jury instructions. We'll read it verbatim. Complicity is not a separate crime. Rather, it is a legal theory by which the defendant may be found guilty of a crime that was committed by another person. For a defendant to be guilty as a complicitor of the crime of first-degree murder, as defined at the end of this instruction, the prosecution must prove each of the following conditions beyond a reasonable doubt. Another person committed the crime of first-degree murder as defined at the end of this instruction, and the defendant, with the desire or the purpose or design to aid, abet, advise, or encourage the other person in planning or committing that crime. The defendant was aware of all the elements of that crime as defined at the end of this instruction. Or the alternative would be the defendant was aware of the elements numbers identifying the appropriate elements, examples 1, 2, and 4, of the crime as defined at the end of this instruction. And the defendant's conduct was not legally authorized by the affirmative defense in instruction blank. For the purpose of this instruction, another person committed the crime of first-degree murder if the prosecution proves each of the following elements beyond a reasonable doubt. That the other person in the state of Colorado at or about the date and place charged, and then we would insert the elements of first-degree murder, and then it says, after considering all the evidence, if you decide the prosecution has proven each of the conditions of complicity liability beyond a reasonable doubt, you should find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder. After considering all the evidence, if you decide the prosecution has failed to prove one or more of the conditions of complicity liability beyond a reasonable doubt, you should find the defendant not guilty. So what does complicity really mean? What does aid, abet, advised, or encouraged another person to commit a crime? Exactly what it means. That person has to actually say, you should go do something. You should go do murder. You should go commit bank robbery. You should go commit any crime. Let me tell you how to do it. Let me tell you where to go. Let me tell you how to get away with it. That would be a complicitor. There's been nothing other than speculation to say that Nichol Kessinger encouraged Christopher Watts to kill his wife and children. Perhaps there were conversations that said, boy, it would be a lot easier if your wife wasn't here. It gets so complicated with the kids. Wow. That is not complicity. That is thinking out loud. That is simply talking about what would happen in a perfect world. It is not telling somebody to go commit a crime. Okay? Now, the other possible theory of prosecution that one would possibly consider in a case like this against Nichol Kessinger, but once again, I don't believe that it is there. And that would be an accessory to a crime. And once again, so we're not taken out of context, let's read straight from the jury instruction that would be required for an accessory. The elements of the crime of accessory to a crime are that the defendant in the state of Colorado at about the date and place charged with intent to hinder, delay, or prevent the discovery, detection, apprehension, prosecution, conviction, or punishment of another for the commission of a crime, rendered assistance to the other person. And then if there's an affirmative defense and the defendant's conduct was not legally authorized by the affirmative defense. And once again, after considering all the evidence, if you decide the prosecution has proven each and every element, you should find the defendant guilty. And the last paragraph is, if you decide the prosecution has failed to prove each and every element of the offense, you should find the defendant not guilty of accessory to crime. The reason why Ms. Kessinger could not be charged with this is that she didn't do anything with the intent to hinder, delay, or prevent the discovery, detection, apprehension, prosecution, conviction, or punishment of another person. For that to take place, Chris Watts would have had to have gone to her and said, I killed my wife and children. Please hide me. Please help me get out of the state. Please do something. Being evasive, maybe not providing all the information that you wished she had, or even provided information that's contradictory. She may not know that. She may not be lying. She could be mistaken. That's what her reality is at that particular moment. So she did nothing to delay the arrest or prosecution of Chris Watts based upon her conduct. And frankly, based upon those interviews, I think she was so desperate to get out of this situation and try to remove herself from this situation that had Chris Watts, in fact, confessed to her, she would have said so and obviously gone to the police to save herself. So I know a lot of people don't like that answer. I know a lot of people would be upset by it and say, but what about this? And yes, you're right. But here I've given you the instructions of law, what the prosecution would have to prove. You can't charge somebody just because you think they've done something and we'll sort it out. When the DAs file charges, they have to say at that time, both legally and ethically, that they believe they can prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt. Based upon what I have seen, I don't believe Nichol Kessinger is ever going to be charged. First, we have an exclusive this weekend on Chris Watts. Chris Watts won't return my letters, but he's writing to Mom. And apparently he has a new lady friend named Anna who visits almost weekly. Anna is alleging that Nichol Kessinger had Chris Watts on a leash. Additionally, his new lady friend talks about their relationship and how he was a poor, innocent pawn of Nichol Kessinger. We do know from the teasers that have come out is that Chris Watts in his letter states, quote, "I'm still a dad, exclamation mark. I'm still a son, exclamation mark. No matter what, exclamation mark. Now I can add servant of God to that mix, exclamation mark. He has shown me hope, peace, love, forgiveness, and that's how I live every day. Love and God bless Chris." There's been a popular theory floating around YouTube that there's footage of a figure walking out towards the truck. Not naming any names, but people think that this figure is an accomplice. When you look at the enhancements and you look at the zooming in, you cannot see figures and shadows that are readily apparent. You also can see that it appears to be Chris Watts wearing tennis shoes. He puts the bodies in the vehicle, the truck, then he goes back in, and what does he have on? It appears to be work boots. Why? Because he was going to work in his work boots. You can take a look at it. Kyle is going to show you the enhancements and zoom in and out, and you decide for yourself, hey, and let's talk about it. when you went to see him, he was still in solitary. That's the way I read it in the book. Is that right?
Yes, the first time. The first and second time I saw him, he was still in protective confinement, he called it.
Yeah. Had he had any issues with other inmates, or no problems that he told you about?
In the Wisconsin prison, oddly enough, he's pretty content. He's in a pod, he said, with handicapped inmates, about 17 in the pod that he's in. He still has his own cell, which he enjoys, having his own privacy, but then he can come out into the day room or whatever, and he gets to go outside, I think, 3 or 4 times a week. But he's oddly content with where he's at. So he hasn't had any problems with anyone where he's at in Wisconsin. Now, he did before he got to Wisconsin. Not that he saw anyone and had any trouble one-on-one, but they screamed at him, he said, all the time, and telling him ways to kill himself, and treated him really badly. Wanted to get to him if they could.
Okay.
I'm sure you've seen a lot of that type of thing, but
yeah, there's a hierarchy. Yeah. There's a hierarchy in prison.
He was scared.
Yeah. Well, no, he should be. I mean, there's a hierarchy in prison, and people that kill children are, not very high on that platform of, or a hierarchy of respect. That's for sure. So he's got something to worry about. The other thing I liked about your book is, one, you came out to the realization, hey, he's pled guilty. But the second one was that you acknowledge, like, how do we know, and you kind of force, how do we know that he's telling the truth based upon what he said earlier, based upon what he's saying now? Why should we believe it? And once again, I like your sort of realistic attitude of it as, it's up for you to decide, the reader to decide. I mean, I like that candor. Can you explain why you put that in there?
Well, because I think all of us feel the same way. Is he telling the truth now? I think he is. I've sat across from him. I've listened to him. I've read his letters. I think he's telling the truth, but I'm not 100% positive. And those who read this story are going to have to find within their own mind what they're comfortable with believing. It's been such a big case, and so many people have been invested in their feelings and emotions with this case. So they're going to have to decide, do I take this as the final answer, so to speak, and this is the truth, or do I continue to search further and dig to try to find? He's never going to tell us some things, just flat out. He told me he's never going to tell who gave him the oxy. And then along the time of talking with him, he said, there are some things I will take to my death. And who knows what those could be.
Yeah, I mean,
some of them had to do with Nikki.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. So, and like I said, I've had lots of clients over the years that have been in, similar type charges, and some they won't tell you everything. Some they tell you what they think you need to know. And even if you think they're telling you just about everything, there's always that one little nugget that they're usually holding back. So when you say, he says, yeah, I don't want to talk about that. And I've had clients that were literally, they'll tell you everything, and they'll get to the point and they're like, we're not going to talk about that. And they just won't talk about it. It's whatever's that deep, dark thing that they did or what brought it about, they don't want to discuss it. And so, like I said, I haven't talked to him, personally. And so but that just, I think perhaps, and like I said, this is not a puff piece for you. If I had read this and said, this is, a hogwash, but you're laying it out there saying, readers, here's what we know. Here's in the public. Here's the letters that you all haven't seen. You decide. And these are facts.
Right.
And they're going to make up their own mind. Some people will be completely dismissive of it, but you know what? You can't ignore the stuff. If you're interested in the case, let's look at it factually and for what it says. and not get off on some wild
Right.
conspiracy theory that some people want to get into in this
There's,
particular case.
yeah, always the conspiracy feeling or theories. A part of it, I think people feel like they would like to be told that there was someone with him, an accomplice,
Yeah.
and they would love to be able to blame it on Nikki because she broke up his home. But Christopher had decisions to make, and he made some really, really bad. All of them were bad decisions,
Yeah.
and
Well,
there's just no way we can blame anyone else. It was him.
yeah. Let's talk about Nichol Kessinger, who is obviously, it's undisputed, that's not in dispute that she was having a relationship while they were still married, and she's one of the last people that he had spoken to before being arrested in texts and things like that. Did you ever talk to her for the book? Did you try to reach out to her?
I tried to find her. I cannot find her. I don't know. I've been told that she's under FBI protection. I don't know if I believe that or not. I think she's just changed her name, changed her looks, and moved somewhere where she feels like she can't be found. And so no, I never got to speak with her.
Okay.
Would
And
love to.
I've tried to
Still
look
would
for
love
her.
to.
I've tried to look for her myself, and I've had investigators do it, and a lot of stuff is still
Mm.
coming back not far from my office. We can go by the parents' home, but no one's actually been able to see her at the parents' home too. So I'm of the mindset that you are, that she is gone. I don't buy the FBI witness protection thing. I don't.
No, I don't
But
either.
I think she's disappeared, and eventually she'll pop up, and maybe one day she'll tell her story as well. But obviously, that's kind of what led to this. I mean, he met Nichol Kessinger, and I guess I just don't understand it. Did he ever explain to you why he didn't just get a divorce instead of saying, "Hey, I can't have Nichol Kessinger and my wife and kids and family at the same time, so I have to kill my family"? I mean, did you ever ask him point blank why he didn't just get a divorce?
I did. Yeah.
What was his response?
Yeah, I did. And he doesn't know. He doesn't know was all that he would ever tell me. He wanted to be with her so badly that he says he just couldn't like function. He feels something dark came over him and was making him do these things and put this into his head, and he planned it for 3 or 4 weeks because this darkness that was in him. And then he'll say, well, she was dark. And then he gave a Bible scripture. I don't remember, Matthew, I think, or I don't remember. I put it in the book where basically it talks about a woman that is kind of a prostitute or a married prostitute, if you will. I don't know. She just and he likened Nichol to that Bible character. And that if you want to see what Nichol is like, read this scripture, and that's who Nichol is. But then you're going to tell me that you loved her so much, and then tell me that there was some horribly bad things that went on in her apartment, at her house when he was with her, that um, again, he will take to his death. He will not talk about all of the things that they did. I don't know what that means.
Okay. But did you get the sense that he was trying to protect Miss Kessinger? I mean, it seems very clear he acted on his own from his statements. I mean, did you get the feeling that, I mean, like I said, in one sentence, he was completely infatuated and in lust with this woman, and he couldn't function, and he had to be with her, so he jumped from that faulty logic, if that's what you say, that only way I can be with her is to kill her, my family, to be with her, to she has a darkness about her. I mean, did you get the feeling, and I understand this is your own opinion, speculation, but was he covering for anybody? Or is it I did it and I just really wanted to be with her?
He's protective of her, and he's protective of his family, as in his sister and his mom and dad. But and he's told me that he still loves Nichol. He still feels a love for her. So in being, I guess that's what makes him kind of protective of her. But as you see, you know, in the letters, he did talk about her and the things that she did that he feels led him to do what he did. And I told him flat out, that sounds a little bit like an excuse. And he says, no, I'm not blaming her. I'm just saying that these are the things that caused me to get off track. And then he would say, well, for 3 months before the murders happened, I didn't pray on my way to work every day. And I used to always pray on my way to work. And so I stopped that. So that's why this happened to me. And just doesn't sound logical thinking to me.
So, while we're on the subject of Nikki, I believe he said in his interview to the police when they came up to the prison to talk with him that he wondered whether some of the letters that he was receiving, if maybe that one was Nichol Kessinger. Did he elaborate on that any more?
He did. He would talk about wondering if she was writing to him like in a code or something. And he had one person that was writing him from Kauai, and he doesn't know who she was or how she got interested in him, but she would write him letters and write things on postcards that was just like they knew each other almost. And she would talk about, I don't know what this has to do with anything, but she would talk about banana bread a lot, which banana bread is kind of a staple in Hawaii. You know, I don't know why that was a big issue for him. And she kept writing about that, about the banana bread. So he was wondering if it was a code for something, if she wrote to him in a code. And her name was Laurel, I think it was her name. I saw a couple of the postcards that he had written, or she had written him. But he was always wondering if she's going to contact him, how she still feels about him, and if she will eventually show up in his life, you know.
Yeah.
Delusional, I think.
Somewhat, yeah. Now, did he say how many people he had writing him while he's been in prison?
Oh my, he has a fan base. I'm going to tell you, at one point, he was getting dozens of letters a day. And that has backed off some, but he does get a lot of mail. And it's funny because I started realizing he is so regimented with the way he does things that he was calling me on certain days. So if he didn't get a hold of me, he wouldn't try the next day. He had to wait until the next appointed time to call me. And not that we agreed to any certain day, because we didn't. He could call whenever he wanted to. But he has so many people that he was calling and so many people that he is writing to that he has to schedule it out, who he writes today and who he calls today. Just bizarre that he cares so much about what people think of him, that the fact that he's got this fan base is really important to him, that he has these women that love him, and another set of women that just minister to him, and basically kind of a girlfriend that he's got. And
has he had other women who are potential love interests come and see him?
There's one that seems to have a real interest in him. I've asked her point blank, do you love him? Are you in love with him? And she will deny it, but she sees him weekly, and she comes to his defense like a mother would come to her little child's defense, or like you'd come to your husband's defense. So I guess only
what's she defending?
him know.
What's she defending him about? I mean, he's pled guilty. He says he's I mean, he's told the police, he's told the court, he's told you in letters that he killed everybody. What could she possibly defend him? Like just saying he's not the monster that everybody makes him out to be?
Exactly. And she was very upset with me that I put the letters in my book, even though he wrote them. And I have a document from him that he sent kind of out of the blue in July that says, Sherilyn Cadle has my permission to write or to use any and all correspondence that I have sent to her for the purpose of writing the book. And so, but this girl is just, she just gets so angry with me that I basically opened up the truth and why did I do that to him? And now he's in such a horrible state. He's having so much, problems with this. And it's not normal to me to defend someone like that when you know what he's done. Who was able to defend Shanann and the girls, against him? So I don't think he has a right to ask for me to defend him.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm assuming you have all the original letters. You have the letters that say inmate mail from the prison, the way they normally come.
Yes.
So if anybody doubts that you had anything, you could produce everything. Is that right?
I did, and I gave Daily Mail the one letter, and then I allowed them to look at the other letters when they were here. I also am taking the letters and putting them into a notebook under clear sleeves. And as I do book signings, if people would like to look at the letters, they're welcome to do that.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, I certainly would like to, talk to the guy. I mean, just my curiosity as a criminal defense attorney, and just kind of generally my experience with clients over the years, it's always curious to see what makes somebody tick. And was it just a complete aberration, a one-time somebody loses their stuff, so to speak, or was really this person just not wired right? And I think that's the intriguing thing is you can hear about the Charles Mansons and the Bundys, and you kind of like, there's just so many of them. It's like, okay, you could see it happening. That's just pure evil. And then you see a guy that snaps once, like, was it only once? Was there something else? Maybe he got away with, you just don't know. And that's, I think, the curiosity thing is what makes this guy tick, because, what does a murderer look like? Does he look like a Ted Bundy that is, went to law school, well, spoken, educated, so to speak, or is it the Charles Manson guy? What do they look like? You can't just say, oh, that one person is going to kill or that one is not. In fact, I had a lady, I was looking through the comments, I think it was late last night or early this morning. She kept going on that I represented Nichol Kessinger. I don't represent Nichol Kessinger. I would love to speak with Nichol Kessinger, but I don't represent her. And